What's up, guys? This is Joel, Punisher's Paintball. Today we are bringing you a tech video. It is the common issues with the Empire Mini GS, extremely popular paintball marker here at Punisher's Paintball. If you guys enjoy this video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll see you guys after the intro. Alright guys, so here we are. We have an Empire Mini GS. This is one of our team guys that traded in. As you can see, with all kinds of tape and all kinds of interesting stuff going on here. We have a standard Empire Mini GS box that comes with your marker if you purchase it new. If you don't have this, you might be without some of the parts that you're going to need to replace this or replace some of the issues that you're having with your Empire Mini GS. I'm here to talk through stuff that we've encountered here at the store when it comes to the Mini GS and things that go wrong. Alright guys, so first thing that could potentially go wrong with your Empire Mini GS is leaking down the barrel. So if you've got a relatively minor leak that you can hear from the feed neck, or if you hear it coming down the barrel, chances are the poppet on the back of your bolt guide has started to wear. So we're going to take this thing apart here. Turtle, are you able to get in on this a little bit?
Yeah.
Even if you have to bring the camera over here. Alright, so you can actually take this back portion out here. Oh, you're able to get it there? Perfect. And then there's a poppet that pops right on out. So you have your actual poppet valve and then your poppet tip, or whatever you want to call it here. This plastic portion is extremely important to create a good seal with the marker. Are you able to see that there?
Yep.
So this portion right here, if you've got a leak down the barrel, it could be one of two things. It could either be that the integrity of this is bad. If you go in your box, in your parts kit to the marker, you have an extra tip that can be seen. There you go. It's right there. So you have an extra tip on there. The problem is that trying to get the plastic portion of this, it's screwed on there. So you basically just go counterclockwise to get it off. It can be a real pain in the butt. These are available for purchase. So you can actually purchase the entire thing separately. I do recommend just getting a brand new one that has both the poppet valve, I guess you would say, as well as the tip, and be able to just purchase an entire brand new thing in there and put it in there. To put it back in, you're just going to take this portion here. You're going to take the little spring that goes into here that allows you to adjust for your velocity through the back of the marker, and you're going to push it all back into place here, as you can see there. And then you're going to take the back portion and screw it back in. You're going to be sure that once you've got it screwed in, that you don't go too far in, you don't go too far out. The black portion here should fit relatively flush. Minor adjustments here for your velocity. Another thing to note is that your regulator itself should be, as long as your pressure gauge is intact, should never go over 200. Can cause leaks all over the place when it comes to that. Alright guys, so say that poppet valve did not work, you replaced it, and you're still leaking down your barrel. Another thing to attempt, and keep this in mind, you might want to do this actually first before you do anything else, is that there are some O-rings on here. I believe that they're size 13, they might be size 11. Look at the diagram. Needless to say, there's 3 right there. You're going to want to replace those, as well as the 2 O-rings that are on the actual bolt. You're going to want to replace those. But if it's leaking down the bolt system, 9 times out of 10, it is going to be that poppet valve. Turtle, can you get in real close on here? Basically, the reason for that is that your air that's inside here before your fire. So this plastic portion is the only thing that's able to seal that. So if it's not perfect, that's what's causing the minor leak down your barrel. Alright guys, so that is how to fix a minor leak down your barrel. Next thing that we're going to talk about is if you have a major leak from your trigger frame. That is a whole separate issue. It is most likely a solenoid issue. It can be one of two things. I'm going to show you the other thing that it can be. But basically, I'm going to show you real quick. If you need to replace a solenoid, I recommend You can service a solenoid and try and reset it, but I recommend, if you're having an issue with the solenoid, if it's leaking extremely loud when you air it up and your regulator's not over pressurizing, I mean it's less than 200 psi, your regulator should always be between 180 psi to 200 psi to get you in that functional velocity range. If you're well over that 200, you could be overloading the solenoid, causing it to dump air, so keep that in mind. Make sure your regulator is the right pressure. If it's not, you can also you might have to replace your solenoid. The solenoids are not super expensive, and I'm going to show you real quick on how to replace the solenoid. First things first, you're going to want to take your back screw out and get the bolt system out. Actually, I mean, if you want to, you could keep the bolt system in, but it is spring loaded, so chances are your bolt system may pop out. I'm just going to take it out for sake or ease of use here. There is another screw at the front here. You're going to want to take that out. All right, so now I've got that front grip frame out, or grip screw out. I've got the rear grip screw out. You would think that you're going to be able to pull this apart. Don't force it, because there's one more screw that you're missing. You're also going to actually have to take the 4 screws on the front grip off as well, so we're going to do that here. We're going to want to set these screws separately from the other 2 screws. Keep in mind that the rear screw for your trigger frame is going to be longer to make sure that you lock your bolt into place. Alright guys, so now I have the 4 grip screws out. I'm going to take this front portion off. Another thing that I like to mention is, if you're having any issues with your Mini GS, please replace your battery before you do anything. Do not use a cheap battery, please don't do that. Put in a good Duracell or high-end battery or whatever the case may be, because otherwise that could be causing your issue as well, as far as the amount of energy output that is going to your solenoid, to make sure that your solenoid has enough power to close properly. That could be causing your issues as well. So changing your battery before any of these issues is always a good idea. The only one that 9 times out of 10 is not going to help is if you're leaking out of the front of the barrel. 9 times out of 10 that is going to be your poppet valve. Alright, so this front screw on the front of the trigger frame, or on the front of the foregrip, I guess you would say, also needs to come out. Otherwise you're going to be pulling it apart and it's not going to work. When you pull this apart, you're going to want to be very, very careful to pull it straight out. As you can see here, there's no wires that connect, so you don't have to worry about that. You're going to set this aside. There's nothing of importance there yet. This silver piece is your solenoid. As you can see, it plugs into the upper board here. You're going to pull your micro switch out, and then this simply just twists out. Now, if you want to try and service your solenoid, you can do that. There are 3 tiny screws in there. This top portion pops off and you can try and reset it. Like I said before, if you're having issues with the solenoid, I recommend replacing it. And before replacing it, I'm also going to show you how to reset the solenoid. But it's as simple as unscrewing it, taking your new solenoid and screwing it in. Another thing that I like to mention is, before you replace your solenoid, because it is the most expensive repair, the other thing that could potentially be is there's a tiny O-ring on your transfer tube here. You're going to want to make sure that that O-ring is intact, because it connects to a tube inside your trigger frame, and there's no O-rings in that transfer tube. But if this transfer tube O-ring is bad, it will cause the gun to leak massively. So you're going to want to make sure that that O-ring is good. That O-ring size is either a 12 by 1 or a 12.5 by 1. I don't believe that your parts kit has that O-ring in it. I'm not seeing it. But needless to say, very, very simple to replace that O-ring. You just need the right size, and it's going to be like I said, a 12 by 1 or 12.5 by 1. By 1 means it's just a really thin O-ring to be able to replace that. Alright, so you've done all that. You've replaced your solenoid. You've checked your transfer O-ring, or maybe you haven't replaced your solenoid yet, but you're thinking about doing that. Before you replace your solenoid, if your O-ring is good here, just take a little bit of lube. We're going to lube that back up. We're going to put all this together. Another thing that I like to mention is, when you're putting this together, there is an 8-prong connection between the upper board to the lower board. You're going to want to make sure that when you get this directly together, that all 8 pins of those go into the upper board. If you're having issues with the gun not firing, it could be because one of those pins is bent. You can try and bend it back and get all 8 pins. All 8 pins need to be talking to the upper board, otherwise there can be issues with the marker. All right, guys, so once you've got your marker completely back together, we are going to try and reset the solenoid. One thing that I like to mention is if you're turning the gun on and it's not working, it's either the solenoid is leaking massively or you're trying to fire the marker and the marker is not firing. It's because your solenoid needs to be reset. So we can attempt that. First thing is make sure that you got a brand new battery in it. I've got a nice Duracell on this one, so it should be good to go. We're going to turn the marker on. We're going to turn the eyes off. You should hear the solenoid clicking. If you do not hear the solenoid clicking, chances are it's because the solenoid is either completely done or it needs to be reset. So to reset the solenoid, you're going to turn the marker on. You're going to continue to pull the trigger and you're not going to hear that clicking. If you start to hear that clicking, that means the solenoid has been reset. You should be able to air the marker back up. Make sure that the regulator setting is still around that 200 psi mark, and the marker should fire and it should be good to go. If you had to reset your solenoid, it could be an indication that your solenoid is starting to go bad and eventually you're going to have to replace it, and I've already showed you how to replace the solenoid there. Another thing to mention is you're going to want to pay attention to those pins that I just showed you. Make sure that all 8 pins are in the correct orientation and that they're all plugging in to the upper board. Alrighty guys, last thing that could potentially go wrong with your Empire Mini GS, even though it is an extremely reliable marker, is a leak from the regulator. If it is a leak from the regulator, there are videos out there on how to do that. I'm not personally going to go dive into the regulator in this video just because it is a relatively complex repair. I do recommend trying to get in contact with either Empire or Core and try and send it into them because there are a lot of moving parts when it comes to the regulator. Make sure that it is not an issue with your output of your regulator, meaning that your regulator is not at 300 psi, otherwise that could be causing the issue. I recommend turning it down by using your adjustment screw here on the top. The only other thing that you could check is unscrewing the front portion here and making sure that everything is in the correct orientation. Otherwise, you're going to have to completely take the regulator apart. As you can see here, there's a spring. There's also a plate here. The orientation of that is the indent needs to be facing the front of this regulator or the front of the screw, and then the spring goes in like that, and you're going to screw all of that back into place. Another thing to mention is if you're having any issues with the marker firing very low velocity, another thing that could be wrong with the marker is that even though your output pressure should be around 180 to 200 psi, if that is the case, you're going to want to make sure that this back portion here is not all the way screwed in. If this back portion is all the way screwed in, you are going to run into issues with low velocity even though your output pressure on your regulator is good. So make sure that you're relatively flush at all times with that. Alrighty guys, so that is about it when it comes to Empire Mini GS. I tried to cover as much as potentially things that you guys might be having trouble with when it comes to this marker. Overall, we really love the Empire Mini GS. I hope this video helped. If you guys have any other questions, comment below. We'll see you guys next time.